Welcome to this mini course called Build Your Low Content Book Empire. So this course is not about get rich quick. I just want to put that right up there at the front. This is about building a book publishing business, a legit business, not something that just gets you some quick cash in the meantime while this whole low content thing is hot, but something that is sustainable over time. That's what I believe in. Do things right, build a proper business, and it will last through ups and downs. So that's what this is going to be about. And we're going to go through 4 different main steps. And the first is going to be the types of books and gathering ideas for your publishing business. Then we're going to talk a little bit about options for designing your books, how to publish your books and where to publish them. And then finally, we'll talk about marketing. So by the time you're done with this, you will have a good overview of the process and all the different opportunities available to you. So in this first video, we're going to start by making some definitions about what is low content books and what are your options, because it's not just journals and planners, which is a great thing because there's lots of different options. So let's just dive right in. So these are kind of my own little definitions of how I define no content, low content, and medium content. And medium is one I've made up. I don't think I've seen anybody else use that before, but I think there are different degrees of content. And the reason why I like to define them this way is because I believe that as you go up into no, low, and medium, your competition starts to reduce. So the thing about low content books is in my 8 or so years online, I have not seen something that has quite this low a barrier to entry. I mean, if you can make a cover, you can buy pre-made templates to use for your interiors, and there's no cost to upload it to Kindle. So there's really no real price barrier. And with templates available, as long as you can put together a cover, that's maybe the biggest barrier, is your ability to put together an appealing cover. Really, it's wide open to anybody to try. And so that's a great thing, but it also means that anybody can do it, which increases the amount of people doing it. So I believe that in order to differentiate yourself, in order to kind of give yourself a little bit more room to work in, working in these low to medium content types of books is not a bad idea, because there's just a lot of people trying to put out no content. It worked for a while, it still works, but it's getting harder because that's where everybody who wants the quick buck is hanging out. Types of no content books. So I don't want to make it sound like if you're doing no content that's a bad thing. I'm not saying that at all. I'm just saying that with the low barrier to entry, that's where the people who want the easy button are. Now, there are people who don't want the easy button that are there too, people that are legitimately putting out great notebooks, but it's getting crowded with others. So I just wanted to clarify that. So no content, I would consider something that doesn't really have much in the way of words. It could be a simple notebook, and notebooks even has like a great variety of things that it can be. Lined paper, graph paper, grid paper, handwriting practice, lettering practice. So there's all different ways that you can do a notebook, but there's really not much in the way of words. Journals can also be low content. There are plenty of journals there that don't require any words. It could be blank lines with rooms for dates. It could be something a little more specific, like a 5-year journal where on each page there's a few lines to write something for each year for a total of 5 years. So you might have January 1st, 2020, and then space for 2021, 22, etc., all on the same page. So that would be a 5-year journal. Maybe something like a line a day journal wouldn't have much content. I've seen gratitude journals that really just, say, list 3 things that you're grateful for today. So it can be close to no content. Sketchbooks obviously have 0 content. Now, you can't actually upload those to Kindle if that's where you're publishing your books. So if you're doing sketchbooks, you might want to look at some of the other print-on-demand providers, and we'll look at that in the publishing section, who already have blank books that you just need to design the cover for. However, you can do doodle books, which is a variation of sketchbooks. Doodle books might have just some frames, some borders, some backgrounds, just some little decorative elements on it, and be mostly blank. You could also actually add like comic book templates to that, or graphic novel templates where there's spaces for people to draw in their cartoon and then write in the content that goes with the comic book. Doodle books can also have prompts like, doodle a flower or whatever. So that would be a type of a sketchbook. So let's move on to low content books. So basically, this just has a little more content. It might require a little bit more research, might require a little bit more writing, a little bit more thought to it. So we go back to journals. So we can have journals that have more prompts, or maybe something that's a little bit more guided, where you're working through a problem or a process. You could also have logbooks or trackers. So a recipe book is a very common type of logbook. So maybe you want to have a book where you write all your grandma's recipes in. That would be a type of a logbook or tracker. Also diet and weight loss, fitness. Maybe if you're doing strength training, you might want to log the exercises you did and the reps. Also, if you have a collection of any sorts, like stamps or coins or LPs, like vinyl records, so any sort of logbook to track that. Calendars and planners are fairly similar. Calendars mostly are a little bit more difficult to do on Kindle. You'd probably want to have them published elsewhere and then listed on Amazon, or you can list them elsewhere, list them on Etsy. There's also some print-on-demand providers that allow you to upload the photos for your calendars, and they will print and ship. And again, we'll get into that in the publishing section. Planners are like day planners, so they could have pages to plan out each day. They could have planners that go by the week, and usually there's a monthly planner in conjunction with either daily pages or weekly pages. You can theme these, and in the next video when we talk about ideas, we'll talk about theming your planners. There's also puzzle books. Puzzle books could be divided by puzzle type. They could be divided by the age group that they appeal to, or you could do activity books. Generally speaking, activity books are done more for children, but hey, why not do an activity book for adults as well? Usually activity books have a variety of different types of puzzle types, maybe even some coloring pages, but they're usually themed. And again, we'll get into some ideas for that in the next video where we talk about ideas. Coloring books, they've been popular forever for children, but as I think everybody knows by now, they've been popular for adults in the past decade or so. And some people think that the trend is gone, but there's still a core of people that like coloring books. And both puzzle books, planners, and also puzzle books, coloring books, and planners, they're all replenishable. People fill them out and they're used up and they need a new one. So that's something to consider when deciding what kind of books to include in your publishing company. Coffee table books, so this would be like a book that has maybe mostly photos, and it's not as expensive to print color as you might think, as long as you keep your page count reasonable. But remember, coffee table books also tend to be priced a little higher, so you can still get a margin even if you do color printing. These sometimes are regional, so it might be like you could do one for your town, maybe some of the historic buildings and stuff like that. Always make sure you have permission to publish photos of people's private property or even public property, because there can be some issues with rights to that. You could do themes like castles of England, or you could do one on different breeds of dogs, those sorts of things. And they're mostly photo. There might be some information as well. Kids' books for young children have fairly low content. So I would say from about first grade and younger, usually there's not a lot of words, and any word count there is very simple sentences, just a couple sentences per page. So that can be very low content as well. And those can be fiction or nonfiction. Medium content books. So this would be things like workbooks. So again, a little bit more written content. A workbook usually solves a problem or takes a person through a process. So an example of a workbook might be like how to write your business plan for your business. And you would give some information on what to do, and then you would maybe give some questions or prompts that the person could fill out in order to accomplish that step. And then you'd move on to the next step and give a little bit of information about what to do next, and then give them some prompts and space to provide answers for their business. So that would be like a workbook. Cookbooks. Oh, and I want to say one more thing about workbooks. If you are able to pair it with a nonfiction book, that would be even better. Or even with a fiction book, like take a public domain book. If you're like a lit fan, take Pride and Prejudice and create a workbook for it that goes chapter by chapter that asks questions. There's a lot of homeschoolers out there that might be looking for something like that. And I will give you a tip as someone with high school kids in homeschool. I'm in one group for high school homeschoolers that has 28,000 members. So think about homeschooling resources for older kids. Cookbooks is another medium content book. Cookbooks, recipes actually cannot be copyrighted because they are a formula or a list of ingredients. What is copyrighted is any description or any of the process that's written out. So you can take a recipe that someone else has provided and just create your own instructions for how to use that list of ingredients. Because after all, there's only so many different ways you can make macaroni and cheese, right? So you can't just have endless variations. Now, I do recommend that you do tweak things a little bit so it's not blatant that you are totally copying. Use recipes as inspiration and make your own tweaks to them. Make them yourself so you know they're good, and then write your own directions in your own words. You can also go back to public domain cookbooks and see if there's anything that you can revise or bring up to date. And don't think that you need to have all this gorgeous photography for a cookbook, especially if you're going for something very specific, like maybe a very regional cookbook, and not just like, Southwest, but like very hyper focused on a certain area. That kind of thing might work, or a very specific type of cooking, like, how to make kombucha. I don't know if I'm saying that right, but how to make a very specific thing. Then you don't necessarily need pictures. If people want the information on how to do it, they'll buy it, pictures or not. You could also do how-to books that have a log or journaling space. So how to make your own herbal medicine, for example. You could give the how-to of how to make a specific type of medicine, let's say a tincture, and then you could give them space to record their own recipes and experiments and how things went. Something like how to make beer at home might be a good option for a book like this. So tell them how to do it, and then give them room to document the process, what they learned with each attempt. Kids nonfiction can also be medium content. So again, starting second grade and older, you can write even the same nonfiction book for different age groups, just adding more and more detail each time. And probably how I would approach it is I would write the high school version of a nonfiction book, and then I would simplify it for the middle school crowd, and then I would simplify it once more for the elementary school crowd. And so then out of one set of research, you've got 3 different levels of nonfiction book. If you like to do creative writing, write kids fiction. Again, different age groups that you can appeal to, different word counts. You could write very specific nonfiction, so you could answer one question or problem thoroughly. And this works great for an ebook. Kindle has a whole category of short reads that you can use. So if you are going to do a very short book, you would want to take a very specific question and answer every possible angle from that. You could also do short stories. These work really well, again, for ebooks, for short reads, and then make a series of them. Use the same characters and put them in different situations. And then there's image-driven nonfiction. So if you have not seen this already, take a look at the book Knowledge is Beautiful, I believe is what it's called. And it is all different things about the world, information, but it's all done graphically, like in infographics and charts. So if you can do that, people don't like to read a lot these days. They want information easily and quickly. Another great example, I absolutely adore DK Books. And every time I see a book that I love that has like lots of pictures with captions and a little bit of information throughout, I look at who published it, and 9 times out of 10 it's a DK book. So there's another example of someone who's really just made beautiful books that they have a lot of content in them, but they are also very photo driven. So they are reducing the amount of content they need to write and using more images. So that's a brief overview of all the different types of books that you could consider putting in your publishing business. And in the next video, I'm going to get a little bit more specific. We'll go through all these categories again, and I'm going to tell you more about how to find ideas for the actual content of your books and go through all these categories once more. So I'll see you in the next video.